Supplements, Proclamations, Rules and Regulations 2735, Volume 146, dated Thursday, November 23, 2023, number 343, enclosing the Emergency Powers, Parishes of Clarendon and St. Catherine, Regulations 2023, under the Emergency Powers Act. The Jamaica Gazette Supplements, Proclamations, Rules and Regulations 2775, Volume 146, dated Thursday, November 23, 2023, number 344, enclosing the Emergency Powers, Parishes of St. James and Hanover, number 2, Regulations 2023, under the Emergency Powers Act. And finally, by way of information, we also have the report of the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives on its deliberations on the motion for exemption brought on behalf of the Member of Parliament for Kingston East and Port Royal. Thank you, Mr. President.
Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives.
The following is a message from the Speaker of the House of Representatives to the Honourable Senate. I have the honour to advise the Honourable Senate that on the 21st day of November 2023, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Agricultural Produce Act was passed in the House of Representatives. Signed, Juliet Holness, MP, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Madam Minister.
Might I signal my willingness to take charge of the bill?
A bill shortly entitled the Agricultural Produce Amendment Act 2023, read a first time.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Minister.
Mr. President, might I ask for first reading of the bill and to give notice of second reading?
Thank you very much. Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions.
Mr. President, if I might note, there are questions on the order paper standing in the name of Senator Morris, and we had discussed before that they had in fact been ready, but we were trying to find a time when Senator was present and able, therefore, to do his follow-up directly. In light of the circumstances, might I propose that we postpone them if he's agreed to the next sitting when he would likely be physically present?
Senator Morris. Senator Morris, we're not hearing you. If you
hearing, Mr.
yes,
President,
I'm hearing you now.
no objections.
I'm hearing you now. Would you repeat that?
I have no objections.
Okay, thank you very much. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public business. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, allow me on this point of having taken to my feet for the third time this morning to say nothing further before I have added my own personal welcome to Her Worship, Mayor Lumsden, not only to Jamaica, but of course to this honorable chamber. It is a pleasure and a privilege to have you here with us. Allow me to express my great pride in the height at which you hold our flag and the excellent representation which you give of the Jamaican community and indeed beyond in within your jurisdiction. So thank you again very much for not only rising to these heights, making it clear that your heights are a reflection on Jamaica's capacity to serve, but also you're continuing to stay connected and to visit with us here in an official capacity. Welcome again, Madam Mayor. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you. On behalf of this side.
Minister, I'm sorry, Senator Scott Motley wanted to.
Sure.
May I just briefly join with the leader of government business in welcoming the mayor. I had the pleasure of greeting her before we commenced, and I can say she has a distinct Jamaican accent, which I applaud that you have kept it throughout all these years. I echo the sentiments of the opposition when I say how proud we are of you as a black woman, the first black woman to occupy this position, the first Jamaican to occupy this position, and you are an inspiration to all young girls and women who can look at you and see how far one can go with dedication and commitment. So I too welcome you, and it has been a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you both, Leader and Senator Scott Motley.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, it's anticipated today on the agenda that we will deal with the Act to amend the National Council on Drug Abuse Act, in fact, the Repeal Act, and the Act with same effect for the National Family Planning Board. We will also continue the State of the Nation debate, with your leave, with the presentation by Senator Dr. Saphire Longmore. I am just noting, Mr. President, that I'm not seeing in the chamber the technical team from the Ministry of Health and Wellness that has conduct of this bill, and I wondered if the Parliament could share if they have heard from them in terms of when they will arrive, because it is our norm to take the legislation first, and I had that discussion with Senator Longmore, so I suspect she has managed her timing. Yes, Mr. President, if we could perhaps switch things around, because the technical team is not present. Could you just make sure they're not here? Thank you, because the discussion. Craving your indulgence for 1 minute, Mr. President.
Very well, Minister. You're going to proceed with Senator Longmore?
With your leave, Mr. President,
sure.
We would ask, and with her agreement, because, of course, she would have been prepared to go after. Mr. President, with your leave, if we might continue the State of the Nation debate with a presentation by Senator Dr. Saphire Longmore.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister. Senator Longmore. Are you speaking from a seat other than your own, or that's where you are located now?
Am I permitted to speak from a seat that's not my own, or shall I assume my own?
No, you can stay there.
Okay, thank you. I'm comfortable with it. Can you pull this up? Thanks. Yes, so. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, colleagues, and everyone present. I rise, Mr. President, to make this my 7th contribution to the State of the Nation's debate. 7th, yes. I have had the honor and pleasure to present since I have been appointed, and I'm very grateful for that. Let me first express thanks to the Almighty, the creator of the universe, who in so many ways has made it possible for me to be here. You guys saw me battle a serious battle, but my battle started from as early as my mom being told that I was a stillborn. And so I'm grateful in more than one ways to be here. Sincere gratitude to my family, my mom, who is on another side, my dad, my two sons, Neo and Axel. My boy Axel is here with us. Please welcome him for me. And for those who know the political journey, that's the one who was in the tummy when I went into Eastern St. Andrew some years ago. He's now taller than I am. The younger one, Neo, hopefully will join at another time. Mr. President, I also would like to thank my friends who are here, Nadia and Yacolet, and those who have supported as family does, as sometimes friends become your family. I would like to thank the Most Honorable Andrew Michael Holness for affording me the opportunity to be a part of his team, and that has taken Jamaica through indeed some very troubling waters. But you know, Mr. President, one of the things that I always admire about the Prime Minister is his capacity for political knowledge and awareness. And at the last annual conference, I learned from him yet again, when he brought it to the fore that Jamaica was in its 79th year of adult suffrage, making Jamaica the longest standing, uninterrupted black democracy in the world. Yet again, something for us to be proud of. And when we consider, and at the end of the day, we know Jamaicans are faced with a choice. When we consider our considerations for leadership, when you hear persons making reference to Topanaris versus someone who is of that political awareness, I think I would choose those that I learned from first. I want to thank my colleagues, of course, in this chamber who, within my workspace, have allowed me the support, as always. I want to thank, and of course, members of the opposition in that reference to colleagues, and of course, the staff of the House of Parliament. Thank you, Mrs. Curtis. Your door is always open, and that of your support staff. Mr. President, I will start. Unfortunately, there is, can I go back on the slide, please? Yes. It's not been clearly shown, but I will start by indicating what is up there, a book chapter that I have indicated that I wrote, Rethinking Democracy and Governance. And why I did that, Mr. President, is a reference that I come to find, as I've said, the need for greater reflection of healthcare in the considerations of governance. I went on to specifically indicate that with many experiences that we have had, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, this need for the incorporation of healthcare in governance is even more apparent. And so, Mr. President, I entitled my presentation, Legislate for Love. And how do we do this? In my State of the Nation presentation last year, I spent some time relating the connectivity of some of our past history to what we are facing now. Everyone recognizes within the state of the nation that our greatest challenge is violence and crime. And so if you permit me, I will play a clip at this point. I don't know if Mr. Merrick is available. I will play a clip at this point that indicates this connection. I'm trying to change slides, sir. a child who is abused and their spirit gets broken, that inner light in them that gets extinguished, and they then develop a sense of revenge and hate. It reminds me of when our forefathers were plucked from our beginnings, when our forefathers were taken from their homes and brought forcibly across to a foreign land and forced in heinous ways to act and to exist, and then unleashed into a new world of the broken spirit that passes on from that generation to the next, to present day. In reality, there are only two real emotions: love and hate. Every emotion is a variation between love and hate. And in those days of colonization, we were taught to hate. Thank you. And so, Mr. President, as we contemplate much of the solutions, this recognition of the variations between love and hate is really very significant. As significant to the point as when you consider discipline in our society versus punishment. Someone will look on and think that discipline, when you're trying to institute discipline in a society, it is an act that is negative. No, it is a very positive act. It is an act of love, and sometimes love has to be tough. And so even in that concept of when we were first raised in our generations, where we should have been taught love and engaging in love, we were taught hate and punishment as a form of communication that passes down, Mr. President. And with everything that passes down, there is also the fact that trauma that can be passed down through the generations. Likewise, healing can be passed down through the generations. And so, Mr. President, we must seek to heal our country of these generational predispositions to violence, of the learned behavior that is becoming our cultural identity. And so, Mr. President, as I have indicated before, we tend to try to pull sometimes from other cultures. I have up there reflections of our motto, out of many, one people. There's a Japanese experiment, if it could be seen properly on that slide. There's a Japanese experiment where a social psychologist planted 3 vases with rice. One vase, he spoke to everyday affirmations, loving, giving love to that vase. The second, he said nothing. And the third, he cursed. After 2 weeks, the one that got the loving words was fermenting and was growing. The one that got nothing, nothing was happening. And the one that got the negative verbal output was dark and stinking and moldy. And that reflects, Mr. President, the realities of the power of words and of the energy that you give when you give love. I am glad to see the middle picture is a return of storytelling competition here in Jamaica, which is fantastic, because that is how we can build our society back. We have lost the art of storytelling. Sweden has asked residents to say hello to each other a simple act of saying hello can impact on a daily life. And Kenyans have been given a public holiday to go and plant trees, quite literally. And so, Mr. President, as we know, the basic unit of society is family. And that generational breakdown of such consequences is what we're seeing now. Domestic violence, our judiciary system is locked up with cases that are family-based. A lot of injustice, and the sense of injustice, is based on the anger from broken families. And so, Mr. President, as a doctor, when I see a problem, I'll write a prescription. But no, I prefer to not write prescriptions. I'm very preventative in my approach to healthcare. Yes, sometimes you have to be therapeutic. And my earlier reference to healthcare and governance makes me want to prescribe the preventative approach to governance. So when we speak about parenting classes, and we're hoping to institute more of these, I would want us to have age and stage appropriate sexual health education. Let us start moving away from the taboo that is sex in Jamaica. When we know it is happening and our young children are seeking guidance in ways that are very unhealthy, that are seeking ways from persons who should be trusted, who turn around and take advantage of that trust. Planned pregnancy, Mr. President. We need to have emphasis on planned pregnancy. Financial literacy from early childhood. Introduce it. Our curriculum is packed with so many things. I know it is. Trust me. I have 2 kids doing PEP. But the things that require survival later in life, like how to manage our monies, needs to be introduced from early. Antenatal clinic registration, not just for mothers, but for fathers too. Can we ensure that when a mother registers in the antenatal clinic, that the father also is registered and attends the classes that are geared towards the early development of that child? Mr. President, we need to move away from the generational appreciation of our men as breeders to our men as fathers. In the colonial days, they were literally systematically detached from their children so that they will not have a bond to break the strength of the family unit. We need to fix these issues within our society and make our fathers play the loving role that fathers can play. Mr. President, our most common form of child abuse is parental neglect. And sometimes, as a lot of Jamaicans do, they go overseas or they go in a foreign land to earn and send back financial support. Those children oftentimes have issues because they face abuse in the care of the persons who they are entrusted with. Mr. President, I wish I had enough time to do the amount of research that I have in my head. But I would like for us to literally explore parental neglect with respect to juvenile offenders and our young leaders in our schools. The kids who are in our high schools, in our primary schools, who are student leaders, and reflect the contrast of the presence of especially a positive role from the father in those children's lives versus in our juvenile centers. As we seek to legislate and enforce care and protection and a safe presence in our children's lives, I have already related regarding fathers' names on birth certificates. We now have paternity leave in our public sector. That is huge. Mr. President, I will also relate, again, pulling from other cultures, I will also relate that first picture. South Africa is the first African country to have shared parental leave. They have recognized the need for both parents to have some time during that critical time. The next slide, Mr. President. The most meaningful part of a child's upbringing is you. And yet studies show that the average family spends only 36 minutes each day together. 36 minutes the average family spends together. And we wonder why we're having certain issues. Last year I spoke to the National Day of the Family and made a call for such. But Mr. President, with time comes refinement. I have a situation that I have in my practical life where I need household helpers. For years now, I've come to appreciate that I cannot have a single helper be with me Monday to Friday. Why? Because she has a family. She needs time to go and spend her time with her family. So I devised a system where I have one person come this day, one person come. And what I find, it works beautifully because they need to attend to their own children, their own obligations for life. And so, Mr. President, when you consider that the greatest display of love between parents and their children, between spouses, in relationships generally, is spending time together. That's the greatest reflection of love. And remember, two emotions, love and hate, and variations in between. So if you're moving away from love, you're moving towards hate. If you're moving towards love, that's where you'll end up. And so, Mr. President, as we consider that time is very precious for family, perhaps we need to start considering legislating for more time for family. Mr. President, the next slide shows, can't see it there, but the research-based evidence of a 4-day work week. The effectiveness in improving productivity. The effectiveness in reducing violence. The effectiveness in addressing behavioral issues in children. And I know that is a stretch. I know. I tend to aim for the stars and I fall on the cloud. But the truth is that as we consider solutions and healing what has had a generational setting, we must consider protecting our children at all costs and protecting the future of our children at all costs. Mr. President, this value for our children is not just when they're born. One of the challenges I have, and what I hate to see, is when a woman is pregnant and she is stressed. It's one of the hardest things for me. There's a particular phenomenon that happens that we have to deal with at a hospital, postpartum psychosis, postpartum issues. And it is very difficult, it's a very hard issue to address. Because you don't want to medicate because you know that that medication may affect the child. But Mr. President, when I reflect on the health implications, the postpartum period, in my experience, is one of the most tumultuous periods in a mother, a woman, and a child's life, and the father's. The hormonal changes create havoc. And Mr. President, the value for children needs to start with the value for our women as the bearers of our children. I see where we have established, I helped to make it happen, the Gender Caucus in Parliament. Just earlier this week, Minister Grange announced the Gender-Based Violence Helpline and the Sexual Harassment Investigation Units being established. But Mr. President, when I speak of the generationality of violence in our society, that postpartum period is actually the first impact of the ACEs in our children, the adverse childhood experiences. The first impact of abuse, of trauma. And so, Mr. President, I think we need to have single mother support more. Apart from having our fathers registered and being more actively involved, support for our single mothers in a generational way that is connected. Online forums, homework clubs, community focus, use technology to enhance the support for our single mothers during that time. Preventative governance, Mr. President, rather than therapeutic. And on that note, I want to emphasize, especially to our mothers, don't use access to the children as a tool of revenge against the fathers. If you and the dad not making it work, the child is the priority and the child's development is the priority. Let us not use access and the development and the healthy development of our children as a tool of revenge in the pursuit of a resolution of your relationship. Seek to establish that communication with your partner, that your child is the priority, and seek to put that in place. And we, however we can, should support that. Mr. President, as I mentioned before, there's discipline, and there's punishment, and there's a difference between the two. And oftentimes it is confused. But Mr. President, I'm oftentimes, and I think we as a society are oftentimes seeing how this is misconstrued, especially in our schools. Policies in schools that should be around discipline sometimes are seeming to be more punishment. For me, a child reaches school late or is in the wrong uniform, and you're going to turn them away for the entire day of studies, rather than allowing them entrance, putting them in some sort of remand, in some sort of disciplining space, and applying the learning that they're there for. They are locked out to go hang around on the corner and the proverbial massaging of the hand middle. We need to shift to discipline and appreciating discipline as an act of love. It is when you are teaching someone, discipline is the ability to delay happiness in the moment for happiness later on. That's discipline. And when you seek to discipline a child, it is teaching that child that there is greater reward if you focus on what you're supposed to be doing at the moment. Discipline, Mr. President, in our schools, not punishment. Mr. President, I shift to the schools and to our teenagers and to our young people. I have two sons, 11 and 10, the tweens. And separate apart from my sons, I have a lot of friends who have kids this age. Last week alone, I got 4 calls from mothers of 10 and 11-year-olds. Every single one of them is asking for my services to deal with anger issues in those children. All 4. Our children are under pressure at school. They are under pressure. They're under pressure to perform. They're under pressure to live up to. They're under pressure with the social media. They're under pressure with expectations. They're hardly getting a chance to be children. I go back to my suggestions regarding family mental wellness days. Our labor laws should be adjusted, I think, to reflect the priority of the time that needs to be spent with our children. Senator Gale, we need to have the time. Use technology. Our laws are set in a time when we do not have the advantages of efficiency that we have today. They were set in a time when the social issues that we have today were not what they were. And so we must adapt and adjust. And as I said, Jamaica is a leader in governance. I'm saying things that I think the rest of the world can benefit from, Mr. President. We need to make time for our children to be children. Other solutions, because I know, again, I'm shooting at the stars. But practical things, mentorship, as we said before. How about aligning tertiary level students to our secondary and primary schools? Aligning homework clubs that way. There's a program, can't see it there, but it's Dads in Schools program. And this is out of Atlanta, Georgia, where they were having high schools that were having serious violence amongst their students. And so they brought in some dads, totally turned the schools around. Mr. President, other solutions for the violence in schools. The elephant in the room, yes, I was brought on by Minister Tufton to help address that issue. And so I will now give an update where I sought to use technology. I basically, with the team at the Ministry of Health and Wellness and the Ministry of Education and Youth, this was a collaboration. I also sought to collaborate between ministries and also UNICEF and the Jamaica Psychological Society and the Jamaica Psychiatric Association to create some audiovisual toolkits that we will be rolling out in our schools. And I have a quick little trailer on one of them. If I will just get the technology, there we go. Can we play this, please? It's supposed to be, oh, there we go, sorry.
Hello students, I'm Christophe, Minister of Health and Wellness. I hope you know that we care about you as a young Jamaican. When you are mentally well, you can be your best self.
Hi there, I'm Senator Dr. Saphire Longmore. Over the next 4 weeks, we're going to have a fantastic series of videos planned just for you, each offering valuable tips to care for every aspect of your health, mentally, physically, socially, and spiritually.
I really do believe that the more connected we are to God and the more we prioritize our spiritual wellness is the more healthy we will be mentally, physically, and socially.
Suppress that anger. Shadowboxing is a great way to lower stress, helps with anxiety and your overall mental wellness.
Your mental wellness matters. Matters for you, for your family, for your community, and for a better Jamaica.
Okay. So this is, we created 4 videos. They are each about 10 minutes long, not even 10 minutes, 6, 7 minutes, and these will be running in our schools around physical health, mental health, social health, and spiritual health. And we will have the psychologists and psychiatrists going in and actually talking to our kids around this. One of the interventions, Mr. President, and we will have other toolkits coming out. Mr. President, as I relate to the state of our nation and our children, we all know that I have called and made my utterances around the mandatory life sentencing, mandatory death sentencing of our child murderers. Earlier this week, I think it was yesterday, not going to mention it, I will just quote. She was fighting for her life as she was videotaped as a teenager being raped and stabbed to death. Videotaped. We must protect our children at all costs. When we say they are our future, that's not an empty statement. We need to have a paradigm shift from the punishment of our children to the disciplining of our children, and the fact that our children should be priority in all matters concerned. Love for our children, Mr. President. That's a big fix for violence. Mr. President, as I shift to the other end of the spectrum, I consider our elderly, and I just wanted to throw 1 or 2 little things here, because at the end of the day, it's health across all generations. The elderly population, as with children, there's a psychological stage that is normal. For children it is, and teenagers it is, identity versus confusion. That, by the way, is why our teenagers especially express anger, especially in the early teen years into the later years, because they're seeking a sense of who they are. So when you have the breakdown of an awareness of their familial origins, it comes out in other ways. At the other end of the spectrum, our elderly face the psychological stage of generativity versus stagnation. This is when we reflect on the life that we have lived and how we have contributed to our world around us. And a lot of times, our elderly population is disconnected from their generations, and so they become depressed. And that depression presents as what we call pseudo-dementia. Pseudo because it is false, it is not true dementia. And so, you have a significant amount of persons in our space, in the elderly population, who are going through this, the nearing the end of life, and it's not happy. if they were able to connect to their generations, if they were able at that stage to feel connected with the generations behind, it could be tremendously helpful. Mr. President, my next picture is one, again, can't be seen, but this is in Okinawa in Japan. And they literally call it the land of the immortals. The average lifespan there is almost 100 years old. Why? Because they have connectivity with each other and with younger generations. It is a systematic part of their society. I would love to see our elderlies more involved in our schools, more involved in our homework programs. And so, Mr. President, I try to consider healthcare across the spectrum. And you know, there are very few times, I've been a doctor for over 20 odd years, and there are very few times that I get up on the floor and not focus on mental health. But if I may say, my first job was being a doctor, that's all I know. And I say this because I see what is happening in healthcare, not just in Jamaica, but in other spaces. I will just say that when it comes to the rollout and the structure of healthcare delivery, one of the best times for healthcare was when you used to have doctors having an office and you would go in. The doctor come and him hang up him shingle and people go in and you go and see a private doctor on your own. That system was changed and it creates significant inefficiency. I will just add that I'm glad to see that we're making efforts to push public-private partnerships in our healthcare delivery system, because it is bringing back the concept of doctors being directly in charge of healthcare delivery. In that healthcare delivery, Mr. President, I have last year, and I've always tried to reflect on the 4 dimensions: physical, mental, social, and spiritual. Last year, I introduced spiritual health with some significance. My years of experience has taught me that when you consider the health of an individual, even in mental health, your spiritual health is the most important aspect. If a child is abused, every one of us is born with a little light inside of us, something that like a fire that makes you you. When a child is abused, as was done with our forefathers, there was an attempt to extinguish or dull that little light. If you abuse a child, and as a teenager and adult, all you're going to do is medicate and medicate and medicate, you are not reigniting the spirit of that child and reminding that child that they have that unique little light. And Mr. President, like everything else, more and more jurisdictions are recognizing this. I have my next slide. The WHO, and this was a speech from the Director General of the WHO in April 2022, when he said, and this was at the inaugural session of the Global Irish Investment and Innovation Summit, "This is the basis upon which we established the first and only WHO Global Center for Traditional Medicine in Gujarat, which the Prime Minister and I and the Prime Minister of Mauritius had the honor of launching yesterday. For me, it is very historic, and I know in traditional medicine, it will be a game changer." That's the WHO. My next slide has this PubMed. This is PubMed. This is where we research medical publications. Spirituality in serious illness and health. And this was a publication by Tracy A. Balboni et al. The conclusions. This systematic review, analysis, and process, based on the highest quality evidence available and expert consensus, provided suggested implications for addressing spirituality in serious illness and health outcomes as a part of person-centered and value-sensitive care. And the next slide, the association between spirituality and religiousness and mental health. This is by Magles et al. In 2018. The results reveal that having higher levels of both spirituality and religiousness were more correlated to better outcomes than having just one of them or none of them.
Mr. President, I wouldn't want to disturb you again during the members' presentation, so I'm going to suggest that the members' time for having, excuse me, members' time for speaking having expired, that we give her sufficient time to complete her presentation.
Thank you, Senator Bunting. Members would have heard the question. Those in favor? Against? Sorry about that, Senator.
Thank you,
Longmore.
thank you, Mr. President. Time waits on no one. Thank you. So yes, association between spirituality and mental health. So likewise, having higher levels of religiousness in the detriment of higher levels of spirituality were also associated with better outcome in comparisons to others. So there's no question of the value of this, not just for the individual, but for healthcare delivery and particularly mental health. We are constitutionally protected for spirituality, Mr. President, as a dimension of healthcare. And I already spoke in my opening regarding the link to violence. It is linked. And so, Mr. President, I went on because I know that a lot of persons are at odds as to what is, how you keep talking about the spiritual health, what is it? And I have just a quick little definition there, not showing again, but spiritual health includes a purposeful life, transcendence, and actualization of different dimensions and capacities of human beings. It is achieved when you feel peace with life, and the benefits of it promote close family and friendship bonds and help people cope with physical or emotional pain and life stressors. Mr. President, I cannot help but think of our teenagers when I read those things. And so, Mr. President, we must embark on methods to heal our present situation. And so I go now to the magic in mushrooms. And we all know, of course, you lay the foundation, of course. And so...
Nobody saw that coming.
Yes, nobody saw that coming. I know, I brought chocolates for everybody, no mushrooms in them. We can pass them out here. No, these are regular Christmas chocolates. And so, Mr. President, I go now to the magic in mushrooms and the motion that is in the House under my name. And so, Mr. President, let me just quickly relate. These are other PubMed publications. Senator Fitzgerald, you shouldn't have it like when you're having a cold. Don't have any dairy. Yes. I already gave him ginger mints. All right. Yeah, dairy not good for the mucus. Yes. All right. Back to the thing. So I will now link psilocybin and its use and practicality in our space. First publication, psilocybin can occasion mystical type experiences, and this is by Griffith et al. In Psychopharmacology, 2006. Psilocybin can occasion mystical type experiences having substantial and sustained personal meaning and spiritual significance. The next, by Cometer et al. In 2015. Psilocybin-induced spiritual experiences and insightfulness are associated with synchronization of neuronal oscillations, basically saying that the change is in the brain. It is literally molecular. It is almost a restructuring that happens. And lastly, psilocybin-induced mystical experiences are related to persistent positive effects. And this was a qualitative and quantitative report. Mr. President, there is definitely magic in mushrooms for Jamaica and for addressing some of the issues that we face here, especially persons who have a history of trauma. We are seeing where it is effective in treating treatment-refractory depression, suicidality, substance use disorders, some of the personality disorders which tend to be associated with violence, like antisocial personality disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, etc., etc. There is no question. There was a request for volunteers. There was a request of volunteers for research, and it was inundated with volunteers. So where are we coming from, Mr. President? I tabled a motion in the Senate a couple of years ago, in 2020, because I, at that time, saw the potential of the use of this, but I also saw the need for the safe application of its use. A lot of people are hearing the stories of bad trips and people having very negative experience. Let me just indicate that it is very critical that the person who is guiding you through its use is qualified or is able to do so, else the mere processing of the traumas can end up being a very bad experience. And that is what, in my experience, has made persons have this very negative association with it, where they take the substance in a setting that is not good. So they take a high dose and go party, and they may be drinking or smoking along with it, and they end up having serious problems. Or, yes, it is being administered by someone who is not trained to help the person navigate it. But if it is applied, Mayor Williams, in a way that is trained, you can have a transformation in the individual. I have treated persons, testimonies, people who were suicidal, who were substance users. None of that anymore. Absolutely fantastic potential. And where we're coming from in Jamaica, Mr. President, I have pictures of the tea and where it used to be out in the grill. And remember, I don't know if you know how it used to be harvested. But we have moved from that harvesting to some of the more sophisticated presentations. You have there retreats. You have at this present time, over 20 retreats. One retreat in Treasure Beach reports contributing over $1 million to the local economy last year. One retreat. You have formulations of gummies, capsules, etc. But again, the safety that is needed. The requirement for caution with especially our children. Next, you have sophisticated growth. Mr. President, because of the legal situation with Jamaica, the industry has actually literally quite mushroomed. So you have unique strains. You have unique strains in Jamaica that you cannot find elsewhere. You have sophisticated growth. You have research being done. This is local research. Henry Lowe et al., The Therapeutic Potential of Psilocybin, Psychedelics, Alternative to Potential Treatment of Treatment and for Mood and Anxiety Disorders, Lowe et al., Psychedelic-Assisted Psychotherapy and Targeting Psychohistoriography, Delahaye et al., and In Silico Characterization of Psilocybin Biosynthesis. This is by Irvin and Rupico Delgado et al., who are basically recreating the molecule. We have taken this to a very sophisticated level, Mr. President. I myself, upon my submission of the private member's motion, have had the opportunity. I was in Cincinnati in October, where I had the honor of being the keynote speaker for the 2023 annual Medscape Psychopharmacology Conference. Big conference that, let me tell you. And there I presented on psilocybin in Jamaica. I also presented at the Ministry of Tourism Health Conference that's held a couple of weeks ago, again on psilocybin. And Mr. President, to ensure, because I saw what happened when we considered the rollout of other industries. And Minister Auburn Hill, I must thank you for allowing me and giving me the support, giving me the support from the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce to propagate the rollout of the psilocybin industry by formulating the Jamaica Psilocybin Industry Working Group, where we sought to ensure that it is the actual players in the industry, the persons who are growing, the persons who are actively involved in the retreats, the academics. We are all sitting down and we are all formulating the standards for this industry to ensure that it is not too restrictive, but it becomes something that the regular Jamaican who can benefit from it will have access to. And Mr. President, the potential for mental health care and spiritual health care is truly amazing. This industry is projected to be over $85 billion by 2028. 85 billion. And Jamaica is at the edge of it, Mr. President. Mr. President, as I go to healthcare, as I consider mental health care, I could not help but bring up something that I had to deal with personally. And we all saw me deal with it, which was, that is the actual press release from the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce, indicating that we have started the working group, of which I chair, and that we're in the process of seeing to the formal standardization of this industry for its safe and available use in our space. Mr. President, as I go to mental health care, as I consider mental health care, as I said, I had to bring something that I personally had to deal with. And this was on the front page of the Jamaica Gleaner. And we all know it. When I responded to, the situation at the Halfway Tree Transport Center. And Mr. President, there's also another clip that came out earlier this week. Cop kills disturbed man during rampage at station. Mr. President, the reason I responded, and people said, why you gonna do that and that? Somebody even suggested that I was seeking attention. I am a first responder. That man was having a mental health crisis. And the first thing that came in my mind was getting him safely down and ensuring that the message is sent, that is not what you do. I don't know how many persons know that during that week we had 3 subsequent issues with teenagers in high schools climbing on top of buildings. That's why I responded. Because when you guys hear me come and speak for years on the need for community mental health teams, that's what we would do. That's why I went, because I was called. And I responded. And that was the purpose of it. This is a situation, cops killed disturbed man in rampage at the station. This is at the police station. And the police could not subdue this gentleman. We need to have mental health teams in our communities that are able to respond to these situations. But not only that, when you have mental health teams that are community-based and equipped, they will do just that, Senator Crawford. They go into preventative mental health. So they also go into the schools and the communities and deliver the messages to ensure that we don't end up here. Mr. President. And so, I also have to mention one quick thing with respect to mental health care delivery, and this is happening throughout healthcare. We're having a significant shortage of medications. But let me respond, and I have looked into it myself. I'm hearing it's a supply issue still from COVID-19. At the end of the day, what this emphasizes is the need for the emphasis on prevention. Prevention. If you're caring for someone who is supposed to be on medications and the medications is not available, contact the care team and we will find an alternative for you. In closing, Mr. President, in a little bit, as we contemplate legislating for love, we have to contemplate who will lead such. Who will lead us in this legislation? Jamaica being forerunners of social justice and governance, the choice is between those who love the poor or those who seek to improve the lives of the poor, Mr. President. So how about putting our money where our mouth is, Mr. President? As we contemplate, and we know elections are in the air, as we contemplate love, Mr. President, what is love? The word is love. I think employment is love. I think increased employment in our public sector. I think unemployment rates are where they are under this administration is love, Mr. President. I think the increase in minimum wage that our administration has chartered is a reflection of love. I think putting in the 1.5 tax bracket minimum is a reflection of love. I think no new taxes since our administration is a reflection of love. I think over 900 doctors being given permanent positions is a reflection of love. I think over 8,000 permanent positions in the Ministry of Education and Youth is a reflection of love. I think social security and tourism workers having pensions is a reflection of love. I think social pensions is a reflection of love. I think paternity leave being a part of our public workers' daily lives is a reflection of love. The talk of unemployment insurance coming is a reflection of love. The largest social program in COVID is a reflection of love. JUTC fares going down is a reflection of love. Custom bills review is a reflection of love. Farmer and fisher insurance coming is a reflection of love. Brady and larceny under the Anti-Gang Act is a reflection of love. Mr. President, my clicker won't click because I want to show the other reflect. Prosperity donkey. The donkey named Prosperity is a reflection of love. Rainwater harvesting facility and irrigation for rural spaces is a reflection of love. Criminal record rehabilitation, Mr. President, is a reflection of love. Cornwall Regional Hospital and the Pediatric Hospital out west are reflections of love. Homeless shelters are a reflection of love. Women's refuge centers opening up are a reflection of love. The oldest black democracy, Mr. President. The oldest black democracy. We are seeking to reduce our electricity bill 100 megawatts of renewable energy to have a 50% source from renewables is a reflection of love. Protecting our environment The cockpit country, Portland Bight, is a reflection of love. Education transformation and STEAM in schools, Mr. President, is a reflection of love. Housing and provision of housing is a reflection of love, Mr. President. Policy agenda being security. You see me, I get tired? Roads, over $40 billion in roads, Mr. President. Over $40 billion. Over 300 JUTC buses coming, Mr. President, is a reflection of love. Going private for collection of waste and making the NSWMA more regulatory of such is a reflection of love. Reduction of the debt to GDP ratio is a reflection of love, Mr. President. Stabilizing inflation and exchange rate is a reflection of love. Subsidy transport, student loans, oh my gosh. Freedom, Mr. President, free to attend heart is a reflection of love. Mr. President, I had a personal choice to make when I was entering politics, Mr. President. And at the end of the day, yes, it's near, so we have to talk up the things. Mr. President, as we consider legislating for love, we must recognize, yeah man, it's all love, and we must recognize that we must fix this rock, this little piece of rock that is so strong within the world space, that is Jamaica, Mr. President. This is a piece of rock, by the way. We have been given warnings of the tremors of the earthquake. Pray, plan, and prepare. That's my message there, guys. You get the fear comes when we are out of control. Pray, plan, and prepare. And my last slide, Mr. President, is, well, it just went off, is a reflection of the power of play, the holistic approach. And what I have there is a boost of productivity of 20% when you institute play in a space. The power of play, Mr. President. And that last slide is my thank you. The uniqueness and the cultural appreciation of Jamaica. I saw this clip out there. Regular people say, stop that. Jamaicans say, hi, hi, hello. So I'm going to say, before you tell me hi, hi, hello, I'm going to stop. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, that's my presentation.
Mr. President, allow me to commend Senator Longmore on an excellent presentation today. One thing we certainly can never have enough of in this life, love, Mr. President, love, 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 love. The world needs more. The world needs more, and I want to just express appreciation for her always willing to think outside of the box, to make fresh suggestions, and to always put her thinking out there, backed up by clearly very strong preparation and research. Mr. President, if I might ask for suspension of the State of the Nation debate, it would take us to the next item on the agenda, which will be the joint debate of the two merger acts.
Okay, so the question is that the State of the Nation debate be suspended for a date to be announced and move on to the next order of business. Thank you.
Aye.
Those in favor?
Thank you, Mr. President. It's fine now. Mr. President, thank you. The first item to be raised is the National Council on Drug Abuse Repeal Act 2023. And as indicated, because both this Act and the National Family Planning Board Repeal Act deal substantively with the merger, or rather the incorporation of the functions of public bodies into the Ministry of Health and Wellness. It is proposed for efficiency to debate the bills together so that we can, because several of the issues are similar, or if not even similar, the same, and the committee references and clause by clause can very easily be separated and dealt with for efficiency in our agenda today. Mr. President, very recently, and just a few sittings ago, on the 3rd of November, this chamber passed the Financial Administration and Audit Amendment Number 2 Act 2023. And on that occasion, I had reminded members of the government's mission to create greater efficiency in the public service. And critical to this effort was a principle-based approach to the categorization and rationalization of public bodies, including integration, merger, closure, and divestment of various public bodies. During that debate, I highlighted that more prudent management of our public resources means that the government, by this efficiency mechanism, is better able to serve the people of Jamaica better by investing more in national development projects such as roads, by delivering better services such as broadband internet to our schools and courts, while borrowing less money. So again, Mr. President, I want to reiterate that we are taking the burden off the Jamaican people while significantly improving our services and their quality of life. So the first bill before us today deals with the integration of the functions of the National Council on Drug Abuse, the NCDA, into the Ministry of Health and Wellness as a department of government. The bill also seeks to transfer the assets, rights, and liabilities to the ministry and to repeal the National Council on Drug Abuse Act of 1991. Mr. President, the NCDA was established as a body corporate in 1991, and it was established to review and monitor the misuse of drugs in Jamaica, to undertake, subject to the approval of the minister responsible for health, measures for preventing the misuse of drugs or for dealing with social problems connected to the misuse of drugs, and to consider and provide advice on matters concerning drug use and abuse. Mr. President, in addition to its current focus, the department, the newly created department, will see an expansion in its functions. The department will also be responsible for national mental health and wellness strategies, and importantly, the management of the mental health and suicide prevention helpline and the UMatter chat line, which caters specifically to persons 16 to 24 years old for the provision of counseling services and general mental health support. So those who want somewhere to be able to call, you may not fall within the 16 to 24 age group. If you're exploring options other than the mushrooms to which Dr. Longmore just referred, there are, of course, an expanded suite of mechanisms to provide support to our population, recognizing and taking conscious action to move beyond talk about destigmatization of mental health and the support of mental health and well-being. These services have been put in place, they are functioning, and they will be part of the broader responsibilities of this newly created department, that is its expanded services. Mr. President, the development of the proposed departmental structure for the NCDA's services has been spearheaded by the Public Sector Transformation Implementation Unit of the Ministry of Finance and Public Service, along with a steering committee that was established to oversee the integration process. The PSTIU carried out extensive consultations with the staff of the NCDA and the Ministry of Health to determine how best to be able to reconstitute the services and the department, eliminating duplications and ensuring more effective delivery of services. So the review and the recommendations for implementation were derived from the outcome of these consultations, which have informed the process to accommodate the NCDA as a department of the MOH, as well as, of course, the legislative amendments needed to fulfill the mandate of the relevant 2017 cabinet decision. The human resource aspect of this integration has proved itself to be of critical importance, not only to the government, but of course to the efficiency and the effectiveness of this process. So these aspects are being managed to allow transition as seamless as possible of a transition. The current governance arrangement of the NCDA will end with the repeal of the NCDA, so that in addition to ceasing to be a statutory body, they will, when integrated, report to the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Health and Wellness as opposed to a board of management. So that's one of the structural changes. All the positions on the establishment of the NCDA as a public body will be abolished, and similar positions will be created within the Ministry of Health to facilitate the new department. And incumbents in posts will be offered related positions in the new department of the Ministry of Health at the same time that their employment with the NCDA concludes. So the start will follow immediately upon the termination, so that there is a seamless move across. And given that the old organization was a public body and that staff are being transferred to positions in the civil service, termination benefits in the form of redundancies will be paid to staff and will be calculated up to the final date of July 31, 2024, which is the target date for completion of this full integration process. I want to share that this is the very same process that's being used for the National Family Planning Board members who are being also absorbed into or integrated into the Ministry of Health and Wellness, in that case, into the Family Health Unit. But the process of consultation, of termination, of ensuring that redundancies are payable with this target date of July 31, 2024, those are all very much the same process being taken by the PSTIU and the ministry, as well as the Ministry of Health and Wellness, to ensure that there's an overall effectiveness of movement and that the ministry as a whole will be able to settle and transition in its new method of delivery of these very critical, socially impactful services. So, Mr. President, the Ministry of Health and Wellness had also acknowledged very much the important contribution made by stakeholder entities which are currently represented on the board of the NCDA in reducing drug abuse. So he has recognized their importance to programming in that regard. And Minister Tufton has therefore advised that he intends to establish a National Advisory Committee on Drug Abuse, so that although the reporting format is now going to change because they become a department of government, the stakeholder element will be retained by the creation of a National Advisory Committee on the matter of drug abuse to provide recommendations and guidance outside of the strict ministry policy-making functionality. In respect of clause-by-clause provisions, or rather the clause-by-clause review, Mr. President, Clause 1, as usual, sets out the short title and commencement of the Act. It is cited as the National Council on Drug Abuse Repeal Act 2023, and it will come into operation on a date to be appointed by the Minister. I've already shared the target date, so this, of course, will be confirmed by Gazette in a normal order of things. Clause 2 defines, for the purposes of the bill, terms such as assets, functions, liability, right, and this is about moving all of the, effectively moving the assets and the obligations of the NCDA into the ministry. Clause 3 addresses the repeal of the National Council on Drug Abuse Act, and Clause 4 seeks to provide for the actual transfer and devolution of assets, rights, and liabilities of the NCDA to the proposed department within the Ministry of Health and Wellness. So it deals with all monies held in any bank account in the name of or standing to the credit of the NCDA, in which case those monies shall be payable, or rather shall be credited to the consolidated fund to be applied in the payment of liabilities, and the NCDA shall be deemed to have been dissolved. And the consolidated fund shall be credited with all monies being payable to the NCDA before, on, or after the appointed day, and paid after the appointed day. On or after the appointed day, any real property vested in the NCDA will be vested in the Commission of Lands, and the NCDA's personal property shall be vested in the Crown. So any non-real estate property shall be vested in the Crown, as would be normal. The Crown shall assume the liabilities of the dissolved NCDA, and any proceedings which may exist or might have been brought or continued by or available against or to the NCDA may be brought or continued by and are available by or against or to the Attorney General. And all records and data of the NCDA will pass to the ministry with responsible for health for and on behalf of the Crown. And I will just note that in the lower house, this was a sole amendment that was made. The Act had spoken to the records and data passing to the minister with responsibility. And that was clearly amended to be that all records and data will pass to the ministry with responsibility for health and wellness. Mr. President, Clause 5 seeks to provide for the waiver of transfer tax and stamp duty and any other applicable fees for the transfer, registration, and later disposal of assets under Clause 4. And Clause 6 seeks to treat with any reference made to the NCDA, whether in any enactment or instrument, and also, of course, it speaks to the fact that in these agreements or instruments, the Crown, acting through the Ministry of Health and Wellness, is to be substituted for the NCDA. Clause 7 proposes to effect the transfer of the functions previously conferred on the NCDA to the ministry, and Clause 8 proposes a few savings clauses. The operation of the Act wouldn't be regarded as a breach of contract or confidence or otherwise as a civil wrong, nor as a breach of contractual provision. It wouldn't give any rise to any remedy by a party or instrument, and of course wouldn't cause any contract or instrument to be void, and it would also, of course, not act to release or allow the release of any surety. Clause 9 contemplates consequential amendments to the Dangerous Drugs Act. One, by deleting the words National Council on Drug Abuse and substituting, therefore, the Ministry with Responsibility for Health in relation to matters concerning the misuse and abuse of drugs in Jamaica. In Section 7G3E, by deleting the words of the National Council for Drug Abuse and substituting, again, the Ministry with Responsibility for Health. In paragraph 1B of the second schedule, by deleting the words one member and substituting, therefore, the words two members, one of whom shall be a person having expertise in the management of drug abuse. And in paragraph 1 of the second schedule, by deleting subparagraph 1 and renumbering subparagraph I and renumbering subparagraph J as subparagraph I. So, Mr. President, the integration of the NCDA into the Ministry of Health and Wellness is a continuation of the government's efforts to streamline the overall delivery of services and eradicate duplication of functions. The circumstances that existed in 91 versus the circumstances which exist now in terms of the functioning of the ministry are such that it has been felt, based on the assessment conducted by the relevant teams within the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, body corporate status is not necessary for the effective and efficient execution of the functions carried out by the NCDA, and as it has always been a part of the overall goals and strategies as outlined in the Vision for Health 2030, and in particular respect of Pillar 5, that is the social determinants of health, it has been felt that the mobilized functioning of the Ministry of Health as a unified team around these services will be a more effective approach than to have a separate body and a ministry working in parallel. So, Mr. President, under the primary healthcare reform, the introduction of the life course approach requires that there is a holistic restructuring of all services provided to the population, and the additional focus of the NCDA on the prevention of mental health challenges in recognition of the link to substance abuse will create synergies that it is felt will enhance the management and delivery of these services. So in this context, Mr. President, I seek the support of members of this Honorable Senate in the passing of the National Council on Drug Abuse Repeal Act 2023. And in respect of the National Family Planning Board Repeal Act, National Family Planning Repeal Act 2023, the second of the two bills being debated at this time, Mr. President, again, it is anticipated that this will result in further optimization of the taxpayer resources by streamlining the delivery of these government services. And again, the Jamaicans will be familiar with the NFPB as a government agency responsible for national sexual and reproductive health information and services. It has been responsible for conducting research, developing campaigns, and disseminating information, delivering and monitoring sexual and reproductive health services, and of course contributing to the development of an enabling environment for our young people, but especially for our young women. Its integration as a department of the ministry, Mr. President, is felt to be an essential part of making sure that this very critical social component of work is optimized. So again, the corporate status of the NFPB will be removed, and the action, again, is also based on the assessment and recommendation of the Public Sector Transformation Implementation Unit. And one of their considerations, of course, was that the body would not need a separate existence or body corporate status for the effective and efficient execution of its functions. So the bill reformulates the functions of the entity when it is established as a new division within the Ministry of Health and Wellness. The nature of the NFPB is anticipated to lend itself to integration well into the Health and Wellness Ministry, and it is felt that this will result in the eradication of a duplication of efforts which had emerged, and that the significant changes, Mr. President, will include the merger of the HIV prevention program and the HIV treatment program under the Health Promotion and Prevention branch. The services also will include the integration of family planning as part of the family health unit of the ministry, and the transfer of responsibility for the procurement and other logistics managements for contraceptives, for example, Mr. President, will move to the National Health Fund, which currently manages the procurement of all pharmaceuticals and medical sundries for the government of Jamaica, and therefore it's anticipated that there will be significant efficiencies and perhaps cost benefits in procurement in these circumstances. Mr. President, a new division is being created, the Client Services Division in the ministry, and it will also introduce new services to the people of Jamaica, including patient care and client support policy and programs, to include institutionalization of the Compassionate Care Project, a patient complaint mechanism that looks at issues of medical negligence and medical legal complaints, and social determinants of health that will look at the provision of social protection support and social work practice for clients. And this will include management of the Compassionate Fund and other social welfare programs, such as social cases in hospitals. Mr. President, I wish to emphasize again that the human resource aspect of the integration is critical to the government, and all efforts are being made for seamless transition. So the same process, again, for emphasis that has been described for the NCDA will be used for the NFPB with the same target date of July 31. Mr. President, just to note that the NFPB does also have a pension fund which will be wound up and addressed in accordance with our laws. Mr. President, the clause by clause reflects clause 1, again setting out short title. The act will be cited as the National Family Planning Repeal Act 2023, and it too will come into operation on a day to be appointed, as has been described. Clause 2 deals with assets, functions, liabilities, and rights, and the clause 3 seeks to provide for the repeal of the National Family Planning Act. Clause 4 speaks to the transfer and devolution of assets, rights, and liabilities of the NFPB to the proposed division with the Ministry of Health and Wellness, in the same manner that has been described for the National Council of Drug Abuse. And clause 5 also waives transfer tax, stamp duty, and other applicable fees. Clause 6 deals with any references to the NFPB in enactment, agreements, and instruments. and of course substitutes the Crown acting through the Ministry of Health and Wellness in those documents going forward. Clause 7 deals with the transfer of the functions previously conferred on the NFPB to the Ministry with responsibility for health. And Clause 8 proposes the few savings clauses which have just been described in the presentation on the NCDA. Mr. President, so again, the integration of the NFPB, as with the NCDA, is intended to streamline the overall function of government service, giving better service to the clients of the service and seeking to pursue a more productive and more successful public service delivery. Mr. President, in this context, I also seek the support of members of this Honorable Senate, therefore, in passing the National Family Planning Repeal Act 2023. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Morris, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I intend to be brief. We on this side, we can appreciate and understand the importance of such streamlining in ensuring that government resources are effectively utilized. I must point out, however, Minister, that both these entities have done tremendous work, have left tremendous social impact, and there is a need for us to continue to ensure that they're able to do this type of work. The National Family Planning Board, I'm sure we'll all remember the campaign, "Two is better than too many." And it was long before, and my mother used that information to ensure that she only had 2 of us. But it is effective, and generations have followed up on that advice. However, we note that several years have passed since the inception of that campaign, and we now face a new plethora of challenges that the Family Planning Board, I don't know what we're going to call it now, Minister. Well, they will have to confront those issues. And one of those important issues that stands before us that I believe has to continue to be at the forefront is the issue of parenting. And while we have other organizations, National Parenting Association, we have the National Parenting Associations, right, that do in fact cater to these issues. I believe that the family planning agency or department will in fact have to look critically at these issues and see how they can fit into their mandate the issue of parenting and the important role that parents play in the social re-engineering process in our country. And so I hope that this process will not just mean us stuffing these persons in a back room in some ministry, but it will indeed reinvigorate the work that needs to be done. Similarly, with the NCDA, the work of mental health, and we've been speaking about it from morning, we note the challenges that exist. And for me, as we move towards this process, it must also mean us investing even more in our mental health plan for this country. We've spoken here in this place about the necessity of psychiatrists. We've spoken in this place about the necessity of social workers. And as we make this move, Minister, I hope that these are things that we're contemplating, increasing these types of human resources so that this department can carry out the work that it intends to do. So there's not much objection on our side but we only hope that we will see renewed efforts and increased efforts to ensure that our family planning, sexual reproductive health, especially of girls, we see the rates for teen pregnancy, and we have to come up with some solid solutions to stem this tide. So there's work to do, and I'm only hoping that going forward, we will ensure that we make the necessary investments to really tackle these pervasive issues that still exist. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Morris. Senator Gale.
Thank you, President. You know, President, as a trade unionist, I would have to speak on matters that treats with the consolidation, merger. In this case, it's a consolidation of workers transitioning from their respective entities into a ministry. I want to first indicate that this is part of the public sector transformation plan. And I want to highlight the fact that the government has an unwavering commitment in ensuring efficiency in the public sector. And this is not about just transitioning, but it's about where you have duplication of functions, where it can create cost effectiveness of our operations, and where you can just enhance the service to the public by considering these transitions. You would have had recently PCJ moving into MSET, and also NASAL moving into MSET. So it's not a new phenomenon. The Prime Minister would have spoken recently about the need for us as a country to focus more on productivity. And I think we are moving in the right direction when productivity is placed as a national focus. Mr. President, this movement in terms of this consolidation, it's a good step in the right direction, and I support the strategic initiative and objective for these two entities to be operating under the ministry that they are so defined with. Minister, one of the things I like about it, and I was listening out to hear, and you represented it, is the question of the communication to the workforce and the consultation. Consolidations of this nature is not an easy thing. You're bringing together different systems, processes, and culture under one umbrella. Defined role and functions, people who are entrenched in their own principled culture, and now you're bringing it into one. And so sometimes if you don't have the consultation, if you don't have the communication, you create a recipe for failure. In this case, the consultation with the workers would have been important, because what the consultation would decide and develop is an enhanced structure, what the structure should look like. Not a question of where you are coming from as an entity of origin to the entity of destination, in this case being the ministry, deciding on the outcome. So I was happy to hear about the level of consultation that would have taken place. And the mere fact that there's a defined period in July of 2024, Minister, it also gives the opportunity for further consultation to take place and to build out. These are two very critical entities, critical social entities that have done tremendous work for our society. And there are many people in the society that depends on this. One of the things I want to ensure, though, in this transition is that, you know, when you move to under a larger umbrella, you may lose your effectiveness to the awareness of society. So I'm hoping that, President, the entities don't lose what they would have built over the years because they now move under a ministry. The workforce enhancement is important. And so as part of the mechanism to transition, you want to ensure that talent retention is important. That's critical. When you have these consolidations or mergers, oftentimes the workers who are coming from the entity of origin may have a fear in transition because they don't know where they're going. And so this is the opportunity or time when some workers say, listen, I prefer not to go. So as part of the consultation is to create that level of confidence that you are moving into a particular area where your competence, knowledge, and experience would be effectively utilized. And President, it involves further, because you're moving into a different culture, understanding and being aware of the culture is important. And you may want to ensure and provide the knowledge and the confidence that there is going to be further investment in training. This is the opportunity now for the workers of these two entities to be operating in the ministry to have further career path and career directions. So transitioning of the new roles can be challenging. And I'm seeing, Minister, in terms of the National Family Planning Board, another positive that would have come out of it is the development of this new divisional client service division, which creates some sort of an expansion. And it may have come out of the consultation with the workers. So let us define and develop and enhance the service to the public. Yeah? So these are some critical factors that has to be taken into consideration. Recognizing the significance of change, one of the things I always recommend and promote, Mr. President, is that you must always have a robust change management impact assessment. So we transition and we anticipate that whatever strategic objectives there are, it will just land and take place. We have to continue this change management evaluation and assessment. Because one of the things we want to ensure, is that there's always room for growth. There's always room for improvement. And that is what productivity is all about. A change in delivery, a change in service. And that is why this government is so focused on improving efficiency in the public sector. And if we are going to speak of a national partnership towards productivity, what better place to start it than in the public sector? What better place to demonstrate the need to ensure that we promote productivity than in the public sector? So, President, this integration of shared services into the ministry, it signifies a pivotal step in our journey towards an optimized, modernized, and efficient public service. And we must all be committed to ensuring that these transitions work effectively and they meet the demands of what is required. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Gale. Senator Fraser-Binns.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I too shan't be long. But I want to add my own voice.
Sorry, Senator Fraser-Binns. I don't want to have to disturb you. I take the 420 motion.
Mr. President, might the Senate be permitted to sit beyond 1:30 to complete the business of the day?
Members should have heard the question. Those in favor? Thank you. Senator Fraser-Binns.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And thank you.
You're welcome, sir, but I assure you it wasn't necessary because I will not be on my feet at 1:20. But, Mr. President, I really want to add my own comments to these bills before us, and our support, as Senator Morris said, we are in support of the bills before us. You see, Mr. President, I've had the opportunity to work with both of these organizations at different points. When I was heavily engaged in one of my youth groups, the Peer Counseling Association of Jamaica. And so I can speak to the work that these two bodies have done over the years. And we agree that at different juncture in an organization life, one has to take stock, one has to reassess to ensure that the vision and the purpose for which they were intended are actually being achieved. And to that extent, notwithstanding the financial benefits that possibly could derive from the merger or the consolidation under the ministry, I believe that the critical point here is an assessment as to whether the intended purposes are being realized. And if not, how can we ensure that we realize these objects? And also whether the purpose for which they were intended have changed, and if there is another role or a more relevant role for them. So that being said, we stand and we give our support. But I want to just mention two quick things. And Senator Gale, who is a trade unionist in here, spoke about them, but I'm sure that Senator Brown would not want me to just say I agree with Senator Gale, but he'd want me to say a sentence or two. So, you know, I do agree with you, but I think what is important, Senator Gale, and I did not hear you saying it, maybe you did and I didn't hear, was that as we consolidate these two entities, that one of the things we have to do apart from engaging is to retool our staff. And it goes back to what you mentioned about the culture and the fact that some of these persons would have been working there for many, many years and would have been part of a particular different culture, but also perhaps would not have retooled themselves or not equipped themselves. And as the government reassesses the mandate and the purpose of these two entities, there is going to be a need for retraining and retooling of the members of staff. And I'm making that recommendation just in case it wasn't said. I am particularly pleased, Minister, that you mentioned the National Health Fund, because having sat on the board of the NHF, I can say without a doubt that the NHF represents one of the best run agencies in Jamaica. And this is across administration, because clearly I sat on it under the People's National Party administration. But from reviews about it at present, the same accolades and commendation has been given to the National Health Fund, which means the members of staff and the management is doing something right. And it is based on that track record that I have some confidence that there is going to be a part of the work that is now shifted to the NHF, and I have no doubt that they will continue to do the stellar work that they're doing there. I am hoping, though, that, and it tends to happen, the best, made plans of mice and men, is that we still have a culture within central government that we are tied to bureaucracy. And given the role and the function of these two entities, I'm hoping that they, having now become a part of the ministry, will not be subject or will not be stymied by the bureaucracy which exists now. There are rules and there are processes and there are procedures that we have to follow. But I'm hoping that their work will not be affected negatively by government bureaucracy as we know it. And final, two last things, and it's now coming from the government to staff and now to those who are supposed to benefit from the service. Everybody know that the drug abuse secretariat, the drug abuse is at Sylvan, I think. And we all know we can find family planning. Now that we are merging, I don't know if there's going to be a physical removal from those locations or what is intended, Plan Minister. But I'm hoping that what we do is public education. Well, the Minister of Health is known for its PR. That is true. And I'm hoping that we will ensure that persons are informed of if there's a removal, if there are new contact numbers, whatever changes that are going to take place, that the community is made aware of it. And this, I believe, will help us to carry through with the object and the purpose for which that has been reimagined by the minister and the government. That being said, my final note is community engagement. The National Council on Drug Abuse and the Family Planning Board is known for going into communities, for working with community organizations. And I'm hoping, Minister, as I take my seat, that the revisioning and the repurpose of these two entities, now becoming units, will continue its tradition of working with community groups to ensure that we achieve the objectives. And with that said, Mr. President, we give our support and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Fraser-Binns. Senator Saphire Longmore.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be very brief, but for obvious reasons, I would like to just add a few words of recognition, as there seems to be this very significant effort, and it is a very significant effort, to streamline our services. I think we're recognizing the need for that efficiency. I'm very glad that this reflection is being done. It has been called for quite a while. And it is also, for me, very useful practically as we deal with the issues that these two agencies are focused on. When it comes on to both family planning and for the substance use and family issues, the streamlining within health and the Ministry of Health will add to a more efficient and effective application, as was mentioned before, in terms of the preventative arms of things, and effectively adding strategies there that can be effective, especially when we consider what I mentioned before, the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, that tend to be very responsible for substance use subsequently. And so it is highly, highly hopeful that this efficiency will lead to reduction in the burden of these agencies, but also in the efficient and effective rollout of their services. And I endorse our previous presenters, especially when it comes on to hoping that the services themselves don't lose their presence, and also the public education that should go along with it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Saphire Longmore. We didn't give our usual shout out to Senator Brown. I didn't hear from him this morning. I hope he's continuing to improve. Okay, thank you very much.
And Senator Brown, I spoke to him 2 or 3 days ago, and he was, it was the first time he drove his car at the recommendation of his son, not out of his property, but he was able to drive it. He's still working on his motor arrangements and his therapy, but he sounded really brilliant. He sounded very
lovely. Good. Thank you. Thanks for that update, because usually we shout out to him, but we didn't do so today. Minister?
Thank you, Mr. President, and allow me to thank colleagues for their contributions. And indeed, I would say that we all share the very same concerns as even I myself had experienced when I first heard about these particular mergers, and in particular the merger of the National Family Planning Board. Just knowing the importance of this service, but recognizing that deep thought had been given to not only the financial efficiencies that were a part of the driving policy, or rather the driving energy behind the policy of mergers, integration, and divestment, but the actual service delivery had been a critical part of the assessment process. It really did give me the assurance that there was very clear thinking around not losing the capacity and not losing the services, but in fact looking at how to do it better. How to do it better, because over the passage of time, yes, cultures develop, and yes, perhaps different ways of doing things develop, but sometimes then better ways are also being developed in parallel, and those, in fact, have been taking place. So I want to clarify a point which I don't think I delivered very clearly in my earlier intervention, and that is that the Family Planning Board, it will now, apart from the pharmaceutical procurement aspect, which will go into the National Health Fund, its services will now become the Enabling Environment and Client Services Division. Enabling Environment and Client Services Division. So all of its services will be about client service and how do we enable? How do we enable better decision making? How do we enable better service delivery? Right, so the procurement aspect will fall into the National Health Fund, which we all agree is absolutely one of the best run institutions that, you know, with a budget of its size, really managing to do its best in terms of investment and procurement. And absolutely, I worked with them closely during COVID, and because of course I had the External Support Coordination Committee, and they were critical to every step of our ability to get new equipment in that dealt with the pandemic needs. But I digress, because I needed to go back to the fact that the National Council on Drug Abuse will itself become a new division. So there will still be all of the functionality that deals with drug abuse. But now, instead of having a division that also deals with drug prevention, or as well, it will be part of this new National Council on Drug Abuse that had become segmented by the public body existence and then service delivery also within the function of the ministry. So again, I think very clear thinking has been exercised in respect of ensuring that service delivery is paramount, and that efficient service delivery and productivity is part of the overall goal. I just wanted to touch on the matter of parenting, to recognize that yes, indeed, this is one of the new challenges. In fact, what it is that it has always been the challenge, or rather for decades it has been the challenge, but it has not been recognized and treated. And this is why, apart from parenting associations, the National Parenting Commission has been established. So I don't think the Family Planning Board, while there is clearly a chain of services that would follow into parenting support, I don't think they will be seeking to undertake that activity. Parenting Support Commission, however, is to be given more resources so that it can do more community outreach and deal with the actual parenting, not the planning aspect, but the management, family management, stress management, coping mechanisms, student encouragement, the elements of making more cohesive families and stronger parenting skills. That is what is being undertaken. And I wanted to just be reminded that the Commission has a target of training 100,000 parents over its next cohort of training sessions. And they have a target of a minimum of 6 sessions per parent. So it's never a thing. No, I remember in the early days I used to ask about this box ticking exercise. that you would say, okay, we've dealt with 1,000 parents because they came to one session and you tick a box. But no, they actually have a curriculum with a series of sessions with a minimum number that parents should have come to in order for them to have delivered certain skill sets. And that is how they're seeking as best as possible to raise the level of parenting for all the cyclic benefits that it will provide. So I believe they're on a cohort of 40,000 for the next increment, and then they build on that. So it won't be part of the NFPB. It's not coming within health. It stays within education, parenting, but certainly the planning element is not expected to fall off either. So, Senator Gale, you were concerned about the losing of effectiveness. We don't anticipate that to be the issue, that the enhancement of client services is what we expect to be the result. And the retooling and reskilling of personnel will likely be better achieved within the ministry mechanisms, because you'll be able to pool the skills of HR. You know, we're rolling out HR Plus within the different ministries to allow for better management of access to information, better management of leave, and general worker well-being, you know, staff members, team members' well-being, and their ability to manage their own human resources services better. So we anticipate that they will have less bureaucracy to deal with and actually more opportunities to access within the mechanism of that ministry. And yes, it is hoped and anticipated that with the impressive communication skills of Minister Tufton, there will be clear communication and widespread communication on any movements in terms of services. But I know he's very focused on primary health care delivery, and therefore it's anticipated to upskill, and to not only to upskill, but to upgrade the manner in which services are being delivered within the health centers within communities. We know that we've been renovating. We know the Adopter Clinic program has been responsible for upgrading dozens of clinics, and the process continues with the priority 135. And the others, of course, subsist at a very good level, so that we do anticipate that these services that reside within the NCDA and within the NFPB that require direct client engagement, that they will be a part of this primary healthcare delivery of service as well. So in this context, I do believe that we are all on the same page, that this is a good thing. It's good for management, and it's good for delivery of service, and it's good for the overall efficiency of the government. And indeed, it does feed into the partnership for productivity, which is what we anticipate. So I want to again thank colleagues on both sides for their interventions, their contributions. As we recognize today, I would just make note that it is World AIDS Day, and the function of the HIV prevention and HIV treatment programs is actually one of the elements that's being dealt with in here and retained. And in fact, with the intention of advancing and making sure we meet our SDG goals in respect of HIV. I would just make note of the many persons who work and have worked within the NCDA, within the NFPB, and who work within giving support to the HIV community, including Jamaica AIDS Support for Life, that does yeoman service in the NGO level. They not only procure funding and ensure that they deliver and use the funding well, but they certainly provide a lot of counseling and a lot of mental health and well-being support to members of the HIV community. So we celebrate them today. We celebrate the work that they do, which is important for an inclusive and cohesive society. And on that note, Mr. President, I would ask for second reading of the bill. Thank you.
Minister is asking for the second reading of the National Family Planning Repeal Act 2023 and the National Council on Drug Abuse Repeal Act 2023. Those in favor? Against? Madam Clerk.
A bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Integration of the National Family Planning Board into the Ministry with Responsibility for Health, to make provision for the transfer of the functions, assets, rights, and liabilities of the National Family Planning Board to repeal the National Family Planning Act and for connected matters, and a bill entitled an act to provide for the integration of the National Council on Drug Abuse into the Ministry with responsibility for health, to make provision for the transfer of the functions, assets, rights, and liabilities of the National Council on Drug Abuse, to repeal the National Council on Drug Abuse Act, and for connected matters. Read a second time.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The Senate will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate to consider both bills clause by clause. Thank you very much. I will deal first of all with the National Council on Drug Abuse Repeal Act 2023, and I put clauses 1, 2, and 3. Those in favor? Against? Ayes have it. I put clauses 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Those in favor? Against? The ayes have it. I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor? Against? The ayes have it. I will deal now with the National Family Planning Repeal Act 2023, and I put clauses 1 to 3. Those in favor? Against? The ayes have it. I put clauses 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Those in favor? Against? The ayes have it. I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor? The ayes have it. The question is that I do report both bills as having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favor? Against? I do report both bills as having passed committee stage without amendment. Minister?
And might I ask for third reading of the bill?
Question is that the bill be read for a third time. Those in favor? Against, Madam Clerk? That Mr. Bills.
A bill entitled an act to provide for the integration of the National Council on Drug Abuse into the Ministry with responsibility for health, to make provision for the transfer of the functions, assets, rights, and liabilities of the National Council on Drug Abuse, to repeal the National Council on Drug Abuse Act and for connected matters, and a bill entitled an act to provide for the integration of the National Family Planning Board into the Ministry with responsibility for health, to make provision for the transfer of the functions, assets, rights, and liabilities of the National Family Planning Board, to repeal the National Family Planning Act and for connected matters. Read a third time and passed.
Thank you very much. Leader?
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, colleagues. Just to indicate that the next item on the agenda is the resolution to affirm the Integrity Commission amendment of Third Schedule Regulations 2023, which were laid on the table of the Senate on the 10th of November. So, Mr. President, I will ask Minister Hill to just lead that brief affirmation process.
Thank you very much. Senator Hill.
Mr. President, the item being discussed was approved in the Law House under the signature of the chairman of the Integrity Commission and a second commissioner whose name I won't be able to call because I don't recognize it. And I'm asking that it be approved in the Senate with just this consideration. As with the principal legislation, Mr. President, it is intended that these regulations will be in keeping with the strategic direction of the Integrity Commission Act and will enhance the compliance of parliamentarians, public officials, and public bodies in the execution of public functions. The regulations will also facilitate the smoothness and efficiency in which statutory declarations are filed and submitted as we transform Jamaica into a digital society. This Andrew Holness administration, Mr. President, is committed to the promotion of integrity, accountability, and good governance, if it pleases you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Minister Hill. Senator Scott Motley.
Thank you, Mr. President. We, of course, have no issue with the amendments because we understand the importance of these statutory declarations. I have a proposal, though. As I am listening to my colleagues who keep on getting requests for more information from the Integrity Commission, I would like to suggest to the administration that part of the orientation of persons in the Parliament is a meeting with the Integrity Commission so that they can be quite clear as to what is required in a statutory declaration. The fact of the matter is, although you might never have received a query, Senator Braham, I am concerned because I would like all parliamentarians to be compliant, and I have a particular interest in the Senate being compliant on both sides. Over here, I urge everyone to send in their declarations prior to March 31st. I am usually the last to do so, however. I barely make it to March 31st, even though I start reminding people from January. But there is some discussion and some contention about exactly what it is you declare and exactly what value you declare. So what is market value? When there's a publication, the publications of the last two leaders of opposition's declarations, Mr. Phillips and Mr. Golden, have sparked some discussion as to, but how come this value is attributed to land? And one of the things that we try to work through is what value are you to give at the time you make the declaration? Are you to do an estimation of what the land would be worth now if you sold it, in addition to the purchase price? Something like that. I think that is important, that we get some clarification so that we don't have to go through the indignity of being told that we are not compliant. I am very happy to see that I'm inspiring you to make a contribution, Senator Braham. And I hope you will do so very forcefully. I did not want to, since the amendment is such a narrow area, I did not want to prolong it. But certainly, please feel free. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I think what Senator Scott Motley is really calling for is greater communication between the Commission and the members of the Parliament. But I think that about 2 years ago, they had individual meetings with a number of persons, if not everyone, but there was some amount of meetings. But I support what you're saying, greater communication. Yes. And one of the, just as an aside, to one of the things that I noticed that sometimes when the reports come from the Integrity Commission, when you look at the number of persons involved, it's obviously some sort of systematic failure sometimes at the institutions themselves where these people work, either not communicating properly to the people or persons not really understanding. So I support your call for greater discussion between the Integrity Commission, not only on members of Parliament, but for persons who owe an obligation to the Commission. Thank you. Minister Hill.
Mr. President, I thank Senator Scott Motley for her interjection because I know that many people, you can imagine, she deals with copious documents, very often complicated ones, in all kinds of cases. Somebody like me, Senator Don Webby, others of us on both sides, lawyers, accountants, bankers, have dealt with tremendous amount of complex documents, but very often some of these things come and it's not terribly clear. It's part of a developing institution, but because of the penalties that can be leveled to people especially, and the focus seems to be on government, and Parliament, one has to be careful that, yes, greater clarity be given, and the communication that you suggest clearly is heard and will be carried to Cabinet to say this is a recommendation from you. And I'm glad that because of the narrowness of this, you have kept the discussion, that broader discussion for somewhere else. And indeed, thank you for your support that this these set of amendments should be approved and concluded today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. The question put forward by the Minister is that the motion be approved. Those in favor? Against? Ayes have it. Minister?
Mr. President, I recognize it exactly for what it is. Thank you, Mr. President. I sincerely appreciate your accommodation by opening the mic. Mr. President, it's been a productive day. It's been a good day, and the contributions have been very focused on delivering all the very best that this chamber has to offer to the people of Jamaica. So I think it is an excellent note on which to close and to ask that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. I just want to signal to colleagues that we are coming to the close of this series of meetings, and that we will take the Christmas recess likely in another 2 weeks, if what I understand from the other place is correct. So I want to just remind colleagues that we had hoped to close out the State of the Nation debate before we went into the new year. And that would give us, it would seem, 2 more sittings. So for members on both sides who wish to contribute, of course, there is always to wait until next year, which will come again as it does every year, so that one can make good note of whatever great ideas we have and flesh them out even more effectively between now and then. Have we not yet finalized our presentation? So I just want to signal that. I've really tried to exercise flexibility in terms of the schedule and to allow persons to be able to make their best possible presentations. But we do need to try to tighten and to close off at some point. So I wanted to send that signal. I wanted to remind that the 2 major issues, or I wanted to indicate that the 2 major issues that are on our agenda that we would also like to take before the Christmas recess is to take the Cybercrimes Act, which Senator Morris Dixon had intended to open the resolution, just to table the resolution this morning and then have the debate next week. So it's hoped that next week she would be able to table and have that debate. And then, of course, we have the Agricultural Produce Act that we would want to take through all its stages as well before the Christmas recess. That, of course, has been tabled today, so that is with us for review over the next period. So in that context, Mr. President, I ask that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Thank you.
Just before we do that, Your Worship, you want to just bring to our attention your Christmas tree lighting? Can't miss that.
Oh, yes. Thanks very much, Mr. President. Well, we have an annual Christmas tree lighting ceremony at the St. William Grant Park. This year it's on July 14th, December 14th. It's December 14th. This year, a little earlier than before. Usually we go into the 20th or the 22nd. Yeah, this year we're going earlier. So you're all welcome, and I'm pretty sure you're in for a treat.
Thank you very much.
No food.
The question is that the
Only
Senate...
great food.
The question is that the Senate...
President, I just wanted to signal that the clerk will circulate the Cybercrimes Joint Select Committee report electronically to colleagues so that they will have it in hand.
Thank you very much. The question is that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Against? This Honorable Senate now stands adjourned.
You'll always remember that day you became a parent. That day, you made yourself a promise to provide for them, to protect them, laugh with them, watch them learn, and let them grow. That day, you realized your biggest challenge lies in bringing them up in a world full of choices. That day, you knew they would grow up fast, and the innocence you cherish wouldn't last. That day, you made up your mind that no matter how things change, you would always take the time to give them parental guidance. That day is today.
Remember, parental controls are available for all devices. A reminder from the Broadcasting Commission.
Let's be clear. Tobacco use is associated with several cancers, lung and heart-related diseases. Smoking harms nearly every organ in the human body and contributes to impotence, impaired vision, bad breath, discolored fingernails, and teeth. E-cigarettes, e-cigs, or electronic nicotine delivery systems, ENDS, can be just as harmful. Many of the e-liquids in e-cigarettes contain nicotine, which is addictive and toxic. Nicotine use can also disrupt adolescent brain development. Early use of e-cigarettes also increases the likelihood of tobacco addiction in later years and can result in a graduation to even more dangerous substances. Besides nicotine, some e-cigarettes contain other harmful substances, including heavy metals like lead, volatile organic compounds, cancer-causing chemicals, and tiny particles that penetrate deep into the lungs. E-cigs, whether they contain nicotine or not, can also cause injuries from fires and explosions from batteries. Children and adults have been poisoned by swallowing, breathing, or absorbing e-cigarette liquid through their skin or eyes. The proposed Tobacco Control Act seeks to protect Jamaica's youth from use and exposure to tobacco smoke, nicotine, and other harmful substances. Let us give the next generation a chance to live and breathe easily. I am Denise Bingham, and I'm from the National Council on Drug Abuse.
of this mosquito.
A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
If you no want pop down and fenke, you fi burn mosquito and run with dengue.